The Boston Tea Party happened on December 16, 1773. It is about how Massachusetts colonists dressed up like Indians and decided to go on 3 different ships and throw 342 chests of tea overboard because they were furious about taxation without representation. What that means is that the British wanted the American colonists to pay for the expenses after the French and Indian War. George Washington did not approve of the Boston Tea Party because he thought that they were destroying tea for no reason and thought that they should all pay for their damages caused. Most people who put the tea in the harbor hid in secrecy because they did not want to pay for the expenses and also because they did not want to be criminals for their actions. So they acted out rebelliously, and that's what sparked the American Revolution. In my opinion, I think that it was a significant act. What I mean is maybe that the colonists should have acted out because they had a right to. They didn't want to pay for the expenses and what happened because they weren't a part of the war. So they thought, why do we need to pay for this stuff if we didn't even do anything? So they reacted. They really thought that they had a right to act out, and they most likely didn't look at the consequences. But maybe that's good because that's one of the events that happened in history and what helped make history. Maybe this happened for a reason to help start the American Revolution.
Benjamin Franklin was a man of many talents and loved to create and think things through. I believe he is a great man. When Benjamin Franklin was growing up, he loved to read books. But his family didn't have a lot of money, so he went to being a vegetarian to save money to buy new books. As he always read books, he started to want to become a writer, so then he started to write stories for the newspaper. His brother worked for the newspaper, publishing the papers anyway. Benjamin asked his brother to publish one of his stories, but he thought they were meaningless and refused to publish them. Later, Benjamin realized that he could put a fake name so then his brother wouldn't know that Benjamin made those stories. Of course, his brother published them, and Benjamin was happy about that. Later, Benjamin became more interested on building things and discovering or creating new things. As he got older, he created electricity, the light bulb, the stove, and the bifocals, also known as glasses, and stuck with being an inventor. Benjamin Franklin is important to the American Revolution because he drafted the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Benjamin Franklin is very important to this country for his many talents.
In June 1755, Congress ordered General George Washington to take command of the Continental Army against the British in Boston. Despite having little practice experience in managing large conventional armies, Washington proved to be a capable and resilient leader of the American military forces during the war. Though he lost more battles than he had won, George Washington employed a winning strategy that included signal victories at the Battle of Trenton in 1766 and Yorktown in 1781. Washington's greatest wartime legacy was his decision to surrender to his commission to Congress, affirming the principle of civilian control of the military in the United States. In the late summer of 1777, the British Army sent a major force under the command of John Burgoyne south of the Quebec to Saratoga, New York, to split off the rebellion in New England. The strategy backfired as Burgoyne became trapped by the American armies led by Harito Gates and Benedict Arnold at the Battle of Saratoga. Without support from Howe, who couldn't reach him in time, he was forced to surrender his entire 6,200-man army. The victory was a major turning point in the war as it encouraged France to openly ally itself with the American cause for independence. By all of this, Washington discovered an important lesson. The political nature of war was just as important as the military one. Washington began to understand that military victories were not as important as keeping the resistance alive. Americans began to believe that they could meet their objective of independence without defeating the British Army.
21 days before the night of March 5, 1770, 5 men had been shot to death in Boston town by British soldiers. Precipitating the event, known as the Boston Massacre, was a mob of men and boys taunting a sentry standing guard at the city's customs house. When other British soldiers came to the sentry's support, a free-for-all ensued and shots were fired into the crowd. 4 died on the spot and a 5th died after 4 days. 6 others were wounded. The presence of British soldiers in Boston had long been a sore point among Boston's radical politicians. Paul Revere wasted no time in capitalizing on the massacre to highlight British tyranny and stir up anti-British sentiment among his fellow colonists. As you will see, Revere's historic engraving is long on political propaganda and short on accuracy or anesthetics. The Quartering Act was also a big part of the Boston Massacre. The Quartering Act of 1765 required the colonies to house British soldiers in barracks provided by the colonies. If the barracks were too small to house all the soldiers, then localities were to accommodate the soldiers in local inns, livery stables, and alehouses, victualling houses, and the houses of wine cellars.
The Peter Zenger trial was an important step toward freedom for most American colonists. John Peter Zenger was a German immigrant that printed the New York Journal. He accused the government of rigging elections, allowing the French enemy to explore the harbor. He accused the governor of many crimes and basically called him an idiot. In 1733, Zenger was accused of libel. This means that he published information opposed to the government. True or false, he was accused. He didn't deny printing the article. The judge felt he was guilty. Zenger's wife, Anna, kept the presses rolling. Her reports replaced the jury with a true jury of Zenger's peers. The trial began and Zenger's new attorney began Zenger's defense. People got upset throughout the courtroom. The most famous lawyer throughout the colonies, Andrew Hamilton from Philadelphia, started to defend Zenger. Andrew Hamilton admitted that Zenger printed the charges and demanded that the prosecution to prove them false. Hamilton then pleaded for his client, Peter Zenger, to be released. It is not the cause of one poor printer, but the cause of liberty, he claimed. The judge ordered that they convict Zenger if they believed he printed the stories he claimed to have written, but the jury came back in less than 10 minutes.
Rebel means to rise up to an established government or ruler, or people with power. In my words, I think what rebel means is to go against the rules and to fight for what is right. Many people did that in history. For example, the Boston Tea Party. They rebelled against England because they didn't want to pay the taxes after the French and Indian War. Many people in history rebelled because they wanted to fight for what is right at the time. Back then, most things were unequal, depending on race, gender, government, and so much more. There are so many reasons in why we rebel, but for the most part, we rebel because we want to fight for justice in our country and our world.